Greetings and welcome to the Mount Rushmore Podcast. My name is Jeff, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friends Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
And we have a special guest in the Con guys are here. Among them is our good friend
Jim Fry. So glad to be here representing the Con Guys today.
Thanks so much for coming, Jim. Today is Batman Day. We are recording at Black Cat Comics in Burbank on Magnolia Street. It is a wonderful, small, independent comics and collectible store, and this is the fabulous place to come if you want to get your latest and greatest comics as they come out and give them a pick list, and they will pull them for you. Or you can get back issues of all the great comics, DC, Marvel, plus all kinds of Funko Pop and collectibles. This is a fabulous place, and they're letting us celebrate Batman Day here by taping this podcast, the Mount Rushmore of lesser-known Batman villains. Are you guys excited about this?
Super excited.
Yeah.
I love Batman. He's got a great rogues gallery.
Yeah.
Him and Spider-Man, basically. Mm-hmm. Everybody else is kind of like a little bit lackluster.
Yeah.
You can feel it's, they're trying too hard. But Batman, for sure, has great top-tier villains, and then he has like, God, he's a bell curve of villainy.
Yeah.
He's got these, a few great villains.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Ringmaster dinging in now. Then he has this big swath of like, who's that guy?
Yeah.
Oh, but Batman's fought him a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you mentioned Condiment King as an example. Yes.
I love the venues that Batman has been in terms of TV and film and serials, as in SERIALS. All the different places have afforded him a wide spectrum of villains to fight that were created just for those platforms or merged from one platform to another. But we're not going to focus necessarily on the Batman villains everybody knows. We can talk about the lesser-known Batman villains. And guess who's here? It's Pat Evans, Pat the Batman fan. How you doing, Pat? Pat, this is Michael and Richard.
Howdy.
And Jim Fry. Pat Evans, Pat the Batman fan, is a huge Batman fan, the producer of The Beat of the Bat, a indie that is about the music of the Batman. Have a seat, Pat. And Pat the Batman fan is also a maker and a seller of Batman replica props that look just like the real thing and capture kind of the fun and awesomeness of all the Batman in TV and film. So welcome, Pat. We are recording the Mount Rushmore of lesser-known Batman villains on Batman Day. Ratcatcher. Pat comes out swinging, weighing in early with his vote for the Mount Rushmore of Batman villains, the Ratcatcher. So, you know what? Let's put this guy on mic. Okay, Pat, the Batman fan, is giving us an example of the Ratcatcher is who?
He's a villain that was created by Norm Brayfogle, Alan Grant, and maybe Matt Wagner in the 80s. His name is Otis Flanagan, and he works for the Gotham City Public Works as a rat catcher, and basically is retreated to the sewers with his rat army. He can control them kind of with a Pied Piper whistle.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. It's a great character, and I, Bruce Timm, if you're listening, I'm sending out psychic vibrations. But I would love to see them come back for one more episode of the animated series with the rat catcher, and they could do it as a tribute to Norm Brayfogle, who sadly died a couple of years ago. He had a stroke, and he wasn't able to draw anymore. Mm-hmm. It was really, really tragic. But he was the Batman artist I grew up with in the 80s. He defined a lot of what I knew. They actually just released a new black and white statue of him. You've probably seen the cover. I forget the issue number, but he's basically in an alley. It's a dramatically lit shot of Batman with the lightning striking in a wet-soaked alley and the capes all jagged and blowing out behind him. It's really cool. But yeah, really sad because he was robbed of the one thing that really, he was able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
all right. R.I.P. Norm Brayfogle. So Pat, the Batman fan, is weighing in with what may be perhaps the most authoritative opinion in this entire podcast.
We can shut it down pretty much. We're done.
But we are the Mount Rushmore Podcast, and we are with the Con Guy and now Pat the Batman fan. And we are discussing the Mount Rushmore of lesser-known Batman villains. And so, Jim from the Con Guy, you are the guest, so you will start with your choice.
I'm going to tell you, I'm a fan of Batman, but until you just spoke, I mean, after hearing you speak, I don't know if I really am, because I don't know that stuff. Like, we're talking about Batman villains. I know, like, the Joker, and I know Catwoman. I know, but like for me, an obscure Batman is like Scarecrow. But even though he was featured in the movies, but still,
in 3 of them.
I know.
Well, there are tiers. You know, you've got Joker, obviously, number one. Some people would put Catwoman maybe up there, but then you go down into, I would say Scarecrow would be at like a second tier. Or, well, I don't know. You got Riddler and Penguin would definitely be on the lower one. Harley Quinn's a weird one because she's sort of shot up to the top kind of over since she was introduced in the animated series as just kind of a one-off thing called Any Thought. Wouldn't it be fun to have the Joker have a female henchman? I don't know if that was a callback to the 60s show or something like that, maybe, because they've done a couple actual subtle callbacks to that era.
I don't want to stray too far, Pat.
Sorry.
I think Jim is doing what they call in the business of show is stalling, is what he's doing, because his list is on his phone somewhere, or he's literally Googling.
There's different levels, and it's not,
Oh, sure. I think
feel bad for not knowing some of them.
Scarecrow's definitely, I think, a B level. Like, he's not a
Kite Man. What about
star.
Kite Man?
Well, when they handle the story correctly, he can be.
Oh, sure.
And that's why,
Well, what I love about like characters like Kite Man, I think that leads into some of ours too, is that it is the act of a writer sitting around and just seeing things around the office, looking out in the park. There's some kids flying a kite. Ha ha. What if a villain swooped down from the sky using the power of the kite? He does. The problem with Kite Man, though, is it does require it to be a little windy. A still night, and he is vanquished.
Yeah, there's definitely limitations.
Yeah, I don't know if Gotham is known for its wind. It's not the Windy City, necessarily.
Okay, so Jim Fry comes out with the Kite Man as his first choice. And so now the Mount Rushmore guys, you get to pick your first choice.
So my first choice, when I was thinking about this, Batman's villains, no matter what level, kind of fall into a bunch of different categories. And the one that I chose was the more monstrous of Man-Bat. So you take Batman, flip him around, turn him into an actual creature of the night, and you have this kind of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde sort of guy, Mark Landstrom, who was a doctor of, you guessed it, echolocation. Kirk Landstrom. What did I say?
Mark.
An M, a K here and there.
Sorry.
Dr. Langstrom was experimenting with echolocation and, of course, used some sort of serum, that had, I'm sure, bat DNA in it. And then, wham, pow, turned into this monstrous bat that, attacks people in Gotham City. And, of course, who's going to take him down but
I just
the
realized
Batman?
I was nitpicking you over the name of a guy who created a serum that
Doesn't
turned
matter.
himself into a bat.
It doesn't matter. But, it's one of those things that, like, Batman is a character that is, in theory, trying to inspire fear based on his image. And, who better to be actually fearful and an actual Man-Bat than the Man-Bat.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Okay, Jim Fry, do you feel like you've been abandoned by your cohort in The Con Guy by Luke Cheeseman, who is, I think, going to show up cosplaying as Robin the Boy Wonder? Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. He's supposed to be showing up anytime now. Katie, who's also in the room from the Con Guys show, she was going to cosplay today as Poison Ivy.
Poison
but
Ivy.
Said she cosplayed as someone on her day off. That's what she did.
She wasn't so sure that her Poison Ivy costume was family friendly for a comic book store, so she kind of decided against it.
Slutty Poison Ivy is what. Okay, all right.
But no, he is going to be showing up pretty soon. He's
So what's your second choice for underrated? You could also team up with Pat the Batman fan if you felt like it, Jim. Right.
I'm going to have to because I know first and semi-second level villains in the Batman universe. And Batman to me is known by the villains, of course, but like I don't know things like hey Pat, what about this guy?
Oh, Professor Pig's pretty interesting, actually.
Yeah.
That's one of the sort of newer ones too. I don't know who created him offhand, but there was a great version in the Arkham games of him. I mean, he's pretty gruesome. He's sort of like a butcher.
Oh yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Come on in.
Yeah, come. Professor Pig and Toad, I believe, is his cover. They did a version of him on the Beware the Batman series that was actually pretty good. Udo Kier played Toad, and I forget who played Professor Pig. Forgive me to the voice actor because he's great.
Does Professor Pig have any particular powers? Look at that alliteration.
No, he's just
there.
Hey, that was beautiful. He's just a big, crazy guy who wears
A pig's face, doesn't it?
pig's mask.
Mask, yeah.
Pig's head. I mean, that's one of those ones that you can kind of go silly with all the way to
To
pretty
gruesome. Turns into
A lot of the villains work that way, actually, which is kind of cool.
Let's see.
First appeared in July 2007, Batman number 666.
Looking at the Santa Monica Junior College manual here, it's the sign up here. Let's see. There's Sociology 101.
Right?
Who's the teacher? P. Pig. Sounds like an easy
Porky Pig?
easy credit.
Porky Pig? What?
That's what I'd be thinking.
Okay.
Interestingly about Man-Bat, real quick, how he was created was basically Neil Adams in the 70s realized that if they didn't do something with the name Man-Bat, Marvel would.
Yeah.
So he I would say he slapped it together.
Sure.
This is a great, but he quickly got it. They quickly moved ahead with that theory, but luckily it turned out to be a pretty cool villain.
Did DC also have a man spider?
I don't know. I think Danny DeVito.
That's right. Yeah, the man cheetah.
We've got to nail down this man Aqua. All right, Michael and Richard, what is your second choice?
By the way, I like that you keep dropping into your Adam West voice. Like, I don't even think you know that you're doing it.
Stan Lee into Adam West.
All right, so our second choice is the Clock King. And I chose him because I can relate to William Talkman. Yeah, I mean, his big superpower, it's not something like cool, like flight or invisibility. I mean, it's really something that if we all work like 9-to-5 jobs, I think we can all relate to. It's just being really, really good at managing your time, like being really efficient at stuff. The man is basically a walking Franklin Covey time management planner. His skills would be incredible if he was an executive assistant at CAA, like working for some agent trying to make sure he gets to all his meetings on time. But I mean, it's like he's as smart as the Riddler, and he's got like kind of that Riddler-like quality, but he's applying it to a very, very specific slice of life, which is just being very good at time. He doesn't have, at least the original Clock King, doesn't have any superpowers, although he can kind of use his knowledge of time to know how long a punch is going to take, and he can dodge. So he's really kind of a nerdy sort of Batman villain, which is interesting to see someone who's not necessarily using his physicality, who's more using his, like I said, very, very specific skill set.
Yeah.
Similar to Flipboard.
Yes.
He falls into also, you said Talkman is his name, the character's name?
Yes.
William
Talkman.
It's whenever a character has a name that kind of just leads them down their eventual, like you were born into this. I think in the Batman animated series from the 90s, he was Temple Fugit.
Yeah.
And it was just, play on Tempest Fugit. And it's just like what's gonna happen to you just because your name is Professor Pig. Paul Pig is you're done for. You are going to be turned into a supervillain because of your
You're not going to get that tenure at Columbia, is what you're saying?
Talkman. Why wasn't his first name like Timothy? Like just get as close to TikTok as possible.
Is there a sense of do we know what year this guy was created?
Yeah.
How you doing?
He was actually created as part of the television series by Bill Finger, who co-created Batman.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it was his two scripts for the show, the two Clock King episodes that he did. And then, like you said, they kind of brought him back for the animated series. I think that was the next. I don't know what his comic appearances were between then and there, but
Right.
Who knows?
created by Bill Finger. And interestingly, did you guys ever hear of the Batman animated series?
Yes.
Came out about 2005.
Mhm.
They did a sort of it was sort of like you didn't even call him the Clock King at all, but it was sort of a time-based episode that I thought might have been inspired by it. But Dave Foley plays a guy who
No.
reverse time kind of, but he's a clockmaker, but he gets sentenced to prison for a petty theft, and in prison he learns how to manipulate time, turn it back. So I always felt like that was sort of
A nod.
a nod. Thank you.
So you guys have said your first two, right?
Yeah, we've got our first two.
So
and they've
Jim
had
Fry,
their
that
first
you've
two.
had your first two, you and Pat the Batman fan.
Yeah, we have.
All right, so now we are at our halftime, and we are excited to invite you to go back to listen to past episodes of the Mount Rushmore podcast and go back and find out more about theconguy.com. These guys, tell them what you do at the Con Guy, Jim.
With KindGuy.com, we are a website and a podcast all about fandoms and conventions, comic book conventions and fandoms that you guys are excited about. So you think I would know a lot more about these obscure villains of Batman, but I'm learning that I don't. So we have a podcast on Monday nights. You can check us out, but you can also find us anywhere you find your podcasts at theconguy.com.
And go back in time like
like William Talkman.
William
yeah.
Talkman, and listen to past episodes of the Con Guy. You can listen to past episodes of the Mount Rushmore podcast on anywhere that you get your podcasts, like iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Microsoft Zune, Simon, the Merlin.
Yeah, the Merlin game.
Merlin,
Yeah.
Okay. So we are back with the second half. So Jim and Pat, the Batman fan. Do you have a choice you want to make, Jim?
So I thought this was more of a joke, but what about the Condiment King? Do you know?
Oh, we discussed him. Yeah, we discussed him before the show.
Oh,
but I
No,
think
he's right in line with who you expect Batman to thwart very easily.
But like he uses various condiments as part of his arsenal. He's a throwback kind of like to the 1960s era Adam West Batman because he's always doing out these funny lines and trying to be funny. But I guess he's more for comic relief. The big bad Bat guy is here. I know you'd catch up to me sooner or later. How I relish meeting you. How ridiculous! I love this.
yeah, no, it's a great sort of like, like you said, a little bit more in line with the campy 60s, Batman 66 sort of feel to it. I do appreciate that it's not like he's got like super weaponized condiments. It's not
You mean like barbecue sauce that like burns you because
yes,
it's too hot?
or like mustard that's actually mustard gas, stuff like that.
I like that there is a Grant Morrison version of this
Right.
character that is so evil and vile
Run with it, baby.
that would just would be terrible. Like he could poison everybody
Yes, by
if he
just
really wanted to.
just by opening up his own hot dog stand and giving them poison. Which, by the way, I think I've eaten at that place and gotten poisoned by it before.
Some of these characters seem to be of a certain era, like they're fueled by like all of it seems like the Cold War or whatever. But like, were we afraid of condiments at some point? Was
What was their big condiment
big
like?
yeah.
Like
I think it was a
keep
plot
on-
device in an episode of the animated series that required a ridiculous villain.
Yeah.
So they probably did for this.
First showed up in Batgirl year 1, but he also appeared in Birds of Prey number 37, where he is defeated by Black Canary, the Third Robin, and Blue Beetle.
Oh,
Interesting.
3
You
of them to take.
He got caught because he was running up on a roof and slipped on some ketchup.
Yeah.
Batman caught him.
hoisted by his own petard or mustard. I don't know.
So Richard and Michael, what's your third choice?
Well, I would like to stay in the realm of Batman 66 and talk about, of course, Egghead. Edgar Heed was his name, and that is just a misspelling away from becoming a Batman villain. Played by Vincent Price. Is there a Vincent Price in the room? Does there happen to be? No. Jeff can only do Adam West. Oh, and look at this guy. Talk about an egghead walking through the door. Now, Egghead on the show was, of course, a super criminal and a former guest of the podcast, Patty Cullum, just walked in the door here at Black Hat Comics. And
Speaking of super criminals,
yeah, he is a brain box himself who I'm sure can talk his way about anything. Would you say that from the audience?
Say that, yes.
There you go. Well, Egghead was basically a criminal mastermind who was brilliant, but also fell into the realm of just making egg-related puns. Like you did on Batman 66. Wore a lot of yellow and white.
Did Batman and Robin have to scramble to catch him?
Oh, I'm 100%. He had like hold on.
Was he a hard-boiled criminal, Michael?
I mean, you wrote an entire episode just right there. He had a bunch of his helpers that had egg-related names too. Of course, I didn't write that down.
How did they not cast Telly Savalas in that role?
That's a good question.
I mean, we wouldn't need to have like a fake skull cap.
I
He's
don't know.
Ready
I
to
mean,
go.
the beauty of the show was that Cesar Romero just put white makeup over his mustache because he couldn't be
Bothered to actually
shave, or maybe that was just part of it too. It was just like put the pancake makeup on the mustache, and no one's
It's kids. Who cares?
We talked about it before we started recording, and television seems to have just good enough. Just get it where it's good enough, and then that's what your budget is. It's not like you get more money to look that much better. You're fine, especially back in the 60s.
Yeah, back in
and
the
70s.
60s, it was just basically, we're just trying to sell toys.
I think they eventually transitioned Egghead to the comic books as well, and I'm sure he did the exact same things. A super genius with a big bald head and
They
made
had him on
egg-related
the Brave
puns.
and the Bold, and he showed up in the Batman 66 series of comics that they did as well. Yeah, good old Egghead.
Can you imagine being Vincent Price and saying, "All you have for me is Egghead"? Give me somebody better than that.
That was an awesome Charles Nelson Riley.
Okay, so you guys are on your third. Have you done your third?
They're on their last.
They're on their last one, so your last choice of the Mount Rushmore of underrated Batman villain. You could toss to Pat the Batman fan.
Do you
if
have a
want to.
favorite you want, or
If you have another one, go for it.
you're kind of like the specialist here? I have one that I have found, but unless you have someone that you think really stands out.
Well, there's always someone. Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, tell me if you know this one. He's a high-tech scientist whose body is irradiated, granting him magnetic powers to attract and repel metal, wood, stone, and human flesh. His name is Jake Baker, otherwise known as Zebra Man.
Wow, that's obscure for a group of even for a group of comic book nerds over here.
Yeah.
Zebra Man.
Have you guys heard of Zebra Man? He's a high-tech scientist. His machinery irradiated his body. He can attract metal and wood.
I think they should make the DCEU revolve exclusively around Zebra Man.
Yeah, I think that would be hell at an airport.
I know
I can't imagine trying to get through security with that. It's just me. I can't take me out of me.
Was that from the 50s by any chance?
It's Detective Comics number 275. He can magnetize anything.
The name Zebra Man is what throws it off. Because it being a comic book from the 60s, you'd think, okay, well, he's kind of dressed up almost like a leopard. Kind of, kind of like a tiger. He's almost like a zebra.
Kind of has a mohawk going on there.
I wonder if those powers developed later on. If he was first well, I've got the zebra costume,
So
and I've got the name Zebra Man.
that was
so-
the 70s at some point then?
Zebra Man, let me see. I will find out. It's Detective Comics number 275, created by Bill Finger.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. So,
Let me see.
If you're talking lesser known, this is hit the nail on the head.
never heard of it.
That does seem like a half-hearted attempt at diversity.
Well, Bill Finger had a lot of ideas. Clearly not all of them.
Yeah, they all can't be winners, everybody.
Okay, so let's summarize Jim's choices. What have your choices been?
We got one
Zebra Man?
more.
We'll get to you guys. We'll just round up
My Zebra Man and the Condiment Man.
Condiment Man
And Kite Man.
and Kite Man.
There's another
Pluck.
Rat
Catcher.
Rat Catcher.
Okay, all right. Now the Mount Rushmore guys are going to register their last choice.
All right, the original fanboy of Batman, Batmite. Sort of. I know this is a divisive choice probably in the Batman community, and that's kind of why I chose him, because I think much like kind of the fandom that he sort of, I don't want to say represents, but I think it acts as a stand-in for in a lot of ways. He can be very divisive as well. And he loves Batman more than anything in the whole wide world. And sometimes that becomes toxic because he just decides that he wants to help Batman out and usually does it in really screwball ways that winds up like hurting him. He's basically a Mr. Mitsaplex. He was like basically their version of him, and instead of having magical powers, he's got this sort of, I guess it's technology from the fifth dimension that he's able to use. And I just think you could tell it was probably, this was a way for Batman's writers to be able to make their little commentaries on every time they got a letter from a fan saying, well, I can't believe that you guys did this. Why would you da 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 da. So they use him as a way to do sort of like meta commentary on what's happening. And I know you mentioned Brave and the Bold.
Yeah.
If you guys have not seen that, it was on Netflix a while ago. I don't know if it still is or not, but definitely check it out. I had low expectations and was really impressed with it. And that was the series finale, where they went full on meta. They had Paul Rubens as Batmite. And basically, the whole episode revolves around him trying to get Batman Brave and the Bold canceled. So he is doing everything that you would do to make a sitcom or a TV show go bad. Like he replaces Aquaman's voice gets replaced by Ted McGinley. They have Henry Winkler come on and they reference Jumping the Shark. They have Bat-Dog have a cousin called Scrappy Dog. So all of these things are happening basically because he wants a darker version of Batman. And eventually he gets his wish, but of course it's a female Batman, which just gets him upset. So I think it's this very interesting sort of piece of Batman, like I said, where you can kind of get the sense that the writers were working through whatever angst that they have about their fan base through this character.
When did that come out?
Brave and the Bold, that was probably like, about late 2000s, early 2012, something like that?
I can't remember, honestly. My brain is
5 to 10 years ago.
I just want to
Fairly recently.
thank the guests that have come in briefly to watch this podcast, and that we've scared them off maybe with our ambivalence toward their presence, so I apologize. We've got one guest who's still here, so thank you for being here, sir. He feels awkward that I haven't pointed him out.
What I like
another
about
guest, friend and guest, Patty.
what I like about talking about like just these random kind of Batman villains shows that Batman has had like this deep history that hasn't always been so serious and dark.
Yeah.
Like you have this guy that, Batmite or Kite Man. You have like ridiculous characters that Batman has fought as much as he has gone after Bane and the Joker who cuts his face off at some point. And just like Batman is like very gruesome and gritty and serious, but at the same time, at some point he did have a dog. It was just like the bat dog that ran around with him. And
Well, that's the counterbalance, right?
Yeah.
Like you couldn't have it be that dark and gritty all the time.
It does seem acknowledging that comic books are a publication that have appealed and have been purchased at different times to different demographics. And if younger children are buying them at a certain time, you appeal to that demo. Or if it's college kids in the 70s, then you make it psychedelic. And if it's 30-somethings, then you got to make it dark and brooding. And what's interesting about the Brave and the Bold and having the characters in the animated show kind of criticizing or doing some meta commentary reminds me of this new, I've heard it called cancel culture, where everything is on the verge of being canceled and fans are on the verge of tearing their fandom apart at all times.
Right.
And I know you've talked on the con guy about kind of toxic fandom.
Toxic fandom is something that we talk about quite often, and it does seem like it's something that's kind of like popped up in the last 10 years. I mean, we've always had Star Trek versus Star Wars, but like the recent cancel culture, or toxic fandom. I was reading an article yesterday about like shows that were fan based but didn't have this. Like we are celebrating, this is a little bit off topic, the 15th anniversary of the show Lost, which is one of my favorite all-time shows on television. And the article was talking about how Lost was a show that was water cooler talk, but it didn't have that toxic fandom with people trying to tear it apart. People just loved it for what it was, and they tried to figure it out. And I don't know, I'm not as familiar with like the 80-year fandom of Batman, but it seems like people that like Batman, and they like all the villains, and you don't see people. There are people that kind of debate about which version of Batman is your Batman, but
Sure.
I mean, what do you guys think about that?
Well, I think that a lot of fans will hang on to whatever was, we talked about this last week a little bit on the podcast. We were talking about Saturday Night Live and how the one that you watched in high school, no matter what age you were, was
Yeah.
the best one to you, and you think that everything that's come after wasn't as good, has never lived up. It doesn't matter how old you are. And I think with some characters, even like a Batman, whatever was the Batman that was your Batman is your Batman. Now it could be the what was it? Danny O'Neill. Danny O'Neill.
See the early black and white?
Like the 1970s version
Oh,
of
no.
Batman. You know, if that, on the edge of coming out of being goofy, kind of making up for the goofiness of 66 Batman. Some people like Batman, all he is this kapow, bam, zoom, and that kind of cemented comic culture for a while. Captain America out there. Yeah, I mean, for some people, that Batman is who Batman is, but for other people, it's a more gritty Batman. For some people, it's, let's say, well, for no people, is it George Clooney?
All Kilmer all the time.
Yeah, nobody believes
Well,
that.
you have people like Michael Keaton has his accolades, and there are people who will forever say that Michael Keaton, who at the time was like, Michael Keaton as Batman, how is that going to work out?
Oh yeah.
But to this day, there are people that think he's the best Batman ever.
Yeah.
Well, there's something to it being the Batman that you grew up with.
Right.
I kind of had it interesting because I grew up on the reruns of the TV show in the 70s, and then I got brought back into the fandom by the Frank Miller stuff in
Yep.
the 80s, and then the movie had a big impact on me too. So
Sure.
I kind of had two waves of it, and but there's no right or wrong answer to that. I don't think it's all a rich tapestry. You don't get the Dark Knight without Batman and Robin.
But we can all agree that Robert Pattinson should not be Batman at all.
Yeah. You never know.
I know that's what the thing is. Like, I always thought, like, when I first heard that, I was like, are you kidding me? But hey, let's give him. I mean, we thought the same thing about Michael Keaton. We really did.
Absolutely. I mean, it was Mr. Mom, for God's sakes.
Yep.
Mr. Mom was going to be Batman.
So, the Mount Rushmore Podcast is usually a debate show where we have contestants and combatants really register their top 4 choices. But when we have a guest on, often that guest is the person who wins because we just
I
love
have no
having
idea
guests.
what was going
No, because they're awesome. We're so glad that they are our guests. So this is we're not differing from that format. Our guests from the Con Guy and Pat the Batman Fan are the winners.
Yes. All
Thank
right.
you, guys.
We are high-fiving right now.
So much. And your choices were the
We were supposed to be the
Condiment
dynamic duo.
King.
and you brought
Condiment
us down
Man.
right here.
Condiment Man.
And Zebra Man. By the way,
Zebra
Zebra
Man.
Man came back in 1987 and ran off with Elemental Woman. I just
Oh.
found that out.
So thanks so much for coming, and we are going to continue our Batman Day festivities, but we want to give a tremendous shout out and gratitude to the Black Cat Comic organization for supporting us and sponsoring us today, and they are a great source for comics and collectibles of almost every fandom you can imagine. We're in the back room right now, and I see DC, Marvel, I see
C-Lab 2021.
they
got everything.
Yeah, purveyor of C-Lab 2021 merchandise. So there's all kinds of, not just comics, but Funko and
Bunch of Star Wars.
and all kinds of cool stuff. And they are at 3005 Magnolia in lovely, beautiful downtown Burbank. So thanks to the Con Guy. Tell us where to find the Con Guy stuff.
You can always go to theconguy.com, and that's the best place to find us.
Yeah, and thanks to Pat the Batman Fan. Pat, could you promote the Beat of the Bat a little bit, if you choose?
Sure. It is a documentary I've been working on for quite a while now about the music of the Batman television series, the Adam West TV series. Most recently, I interviewed Robert Butler, who is the director of the pilot episode of the show. Finally got around it. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was cool. And then just recently interviewed Burt Ward, too, about his recordings that he did with Frank Zappa. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It was the studio kind of wanted to, capitalize on his teen sensation or teen idol
Musical
image.
recordings?
Yeah, so he couldn't sing. They sent him for singing lessons, and it's hopeless. And he'll tell you this. But they wanted to make some money, so they sent him into the studio, and the project manager or project leader or whatever was a young Frank Zappa, pre Mothers of Invention, and they did a song called Boy Wonder I Love You, which was basically him just kind of reading like a version of the general fan letters he got, from girls wanting him to come over to their house and stay overnight and all this stuff, or walk them to school, and yeah, it's as bad as you're picturing in your head. But Bert got, it was. I don't think anybody's ever asked him about it before, even though it's sort of it's not. It's kind of obscure, but not like unknown. So I thought he got a kick out of talking about it.
So thank you so much. This has been the Mount Rushmore podcast. I, as always, am Jeff.
I'm Richard.
I'm Michael.
I'm Jim. Guest.
Special guest Luke Cheeseman, not in the
Never
house.
shown up.
Not present. It was kidnapped by Eggman.
Egghead.
I had no idea.
No, he was kidnapped by Eggman and the